Hello everyone, welcome back. Tom with Capo Fetish. Today I'm going to talk about 10 favorite underrated female vocalists. We're going to mix it up a little bit between eras. So, and this is no ranking, it's just random artists. So I'm going to start off here right now with first pick here is Sandy Denny. Sandy Denny is probably most well known in America for, and all over the world, for her duet with Robert Plant on Zeppelin 4's The Battle of Evermore. I think if you mention the word Sandy Denny, people will go, oh yeah, Battle of Evermore, Led Zeppelin. But I think her best work was with the British folk band called Fairport Convention. This is their album called Legion Leaf from 1969. And this is one of the greatest British folk albums, in my opinion. We have Richard Thompson on lead guitar. I think this is his last or next to last album he was featured on with Fairport Convention before he ventured off into a solo career. But this album, I think, represents Sandy Denny at a peak here. We have amazing songs like Come All Ye. We have Farewell, Farewell, just a gorgeous song that ends side one. We got Tam Lin, and we have Crazy Man Michael. Those are just a few of the great songs on this particular album. I think one of her greatest songs, though, is on an album called Unhalf Bricking. This came out in 1969 as well. The song is called Who Knows Where the Time Goes. This is kind of considered her kind of her standard, kind of her featured song. But yeah, I mean, maybe she's known in folk circles and stuff like that, but no one really talks a whole lot about Sandy Denny. I think people like Natalie Merchant from the 10,000 Maniacs gained a lot of influence from her. If you listen to Natalie Merchant, you can hear a little strain of Sandy Denny, but very influential vocalist. And unfortunately, in 1978, she fell down a flight of stairs, injured her head, and died. And she had a long-running battle with alcoholism, and it's kind of a sad life, but she left behind a legacy of great material. I don't have any of her solo records, and I tend to get some. I think there's a couple of great compilations out there, but her solo career offers many jewels as well. But I think if you're going to look into Sandy Denny, look into this album and the previous one I mentioned, Legion Leaf. Those are fantastic records. So, from Fairport Convention. So, I think another one too, another band that she formed after she left Fairport is Father and Gay. Check this out. This has some really good material as well. When you think of Grace Slick, you think of Somebody to Love, White Rabbit. And those are amazing vocals, you know, especially on Somebody to Love. I mean, I think she's very undervalued, very underappreciated. Maybe because those are the only two songs that are really representative of her on the radio. If you dig deep into the Jefferson Airplane catalog, there's just a slew of great Grace Slick tunes. A lot of people consider Nico as kind of like the godmother of goth, but I think Grace Slick should be titled the grandmother of goth. If you listen to songs like Rejoice off After Bathing at Baxter's and Two Heads, very dark, very gothish. She definitely has her own style. Nobody sounds like Grace Slick. If you listen to Crown of Creation, the album from 1968, you have a song called Lather. It starts the album very, very moody, very dark, and she just has that very unmistakable voice that's Grace Slick. And also, she does an amazing version of David Crosby's Triad, which was left off the notorious Bird Brothers by the Byrds because of its menage a trois content. But yeah, her voice is just fantastic. I think it's very underrated. And it's all over these great Jefferson Airplane albums. Off the album Volunteers from '69, you have a song called Eskimo Blue Day, which I think is a really good showcase for her vocals. Kind of angry. The song's a little bit angry. And, you know, she also had an edge to her, too, with her vocals. If she wasn't doing kind of the goth, dark vocal, she could really belt it out with the best of them. So that's another great, underrated singer, in my opinion, from the rock era is Grace Slick. Moving towards the early 80s, another vocalist I always loved is Martha Davis from the Motels. This is their 1980 album, Careful. The song called Danger is on here, which is kind of a hit on K-Rock at the time. I think it got a little bit of mainstream airplay, but it's just a fantastic song. There's Martha on the back right there. And at the time, she was heavily heavily touted as just the next big thing. They did have a few big hits along the way, being Danger on this album, Only the Lonely from '82, and Suddenly Last Summer from '83, but they never really got to the point of like an arena type rock band, and slowly they're kind of what would you say, their kind of fame kind of faded into the '80s. I think they're still playing out today, but I always thought Martha Davis had just an incredible voice, an incredible presence. If you pull up some of the YouTube videos of Only the Lonely and Danger, you could tell that she just has an amazing stage presence, her looks, her vibe. So I love Martha Davis, and that's another one too. I think that's very underappreciated and undervalued as far as vocalists go. And then one who's highly touted as a great lyricist, great arranger, great songwriter, but I think Laura Nyro has just an amazing voice, and no one really talks a whole lot about Laura Nyro. I think her voice probably influenced Joni Mitchell. In fact, I've read that Joni Mitchell was influenced by Laura Nyro. This is her first album, self-titled on the Verve label. There's a lot of great songs on here. Songs written for other artists. Wedding Bill Blues is on here, later covered by The Fifth Dimension. You have And When I Die, later covered by Blood, Sweat, and Tears. A lot of her songs were covered by other artists and made famous by these other artists. You have Stony End on here, later covered by Barbra Streisand. But her vocals are just amazing. It's almost kind of like Broadway-type vocals. She didn't sound like anybody at the time and still doesn't sound like anybody. Nobody wrote like her. Nobody sang like her. I think her vocals are very, very, very underrated. Her second album, I think, is her true masterpiece, Eli and the 13th Confession. You have just amazing songs. There's a song on here called Lou, L-U, Louie, 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 she says in the song. And she goes into all these chord changes, the brass section, everything. Her songs are very unpredictable. They're not the predictable verse, chorus, verse a lot of the time. They head off into all these weird, sort of cool tangents, would you say? But they work in some weird kind of way, in some weird idiosyncratic way. They work. Also on this album, you have a song called Poverty Train, which is just one of her greatest vocals. Eli's Comin' is on here from Three Dog Night. They made a big hit out of it. And then you got Stone Soul Picnic as well, later covered by The Fifth Dimension. But the whole album as a whole is just a masterpiece of vocals, songwriting, arranging, a real true talent. We lost her too early back in the 90s, but I would highly suggest picking this up, or maybe New York Tannenberry, or the first debut album, or even just pick up a best of. She's an amazing talent, very underrated in my opinion. Next up we have from the mid-'80s, early to mid-'80s, pretty much throughout the 80s, vocalist Elizabeth Fraser from the Cocteau Twins. I feel this is one of their greatest albums here, Bluebell Knoll. This came out in 1988. Elizabeth Fraser is very unique. She doesn't really sing words. She just kind of comes up with sounds and phrasing and haunting vocals. They're a dream pop band. You got Robin Guthrie, who she was married to, who is pretty much the center of all the songs, creator of the songs, the guitarist. But it's Elizabeth out front that really blows your mind when you listen to the Cocteau Twins, which she does with her vocals. And even the song titles are really bizarre. On this album, you've got a song called Carolyn's Fingers, which is just outrageously incredible. Another one called Kiko Bluff, which starts off side 2, or half of the disc as it is on CD here. And then there's another one that's really amazing called Suckling the Mender on this album. Really, really great stuff. Her voice is almost like some kind of demented angel, just what she does with her voice is like unlike really anybody who I've ever heard in my life. Elizabeth Fraser. Another great album of the Cocteau Twins is Treasure, which came out in 1984. Host of great songs on here as well. Lorelei, Pandora, and this one tune, which is absolutely one of my favorite Cocteau Twins songs called Aloysius. Aloysius. So if you haven't heard Elizabeth Fraser, check her out. Check out some Cocteau Twins. You'll be blown away by her voice, and just the melodies, the otherworldly melodies that she comes up with her vocals. Incredible stuff. So Elizabeth Fraser. And then I've mentioned this artist many times ad nauseum, but I can't help it. I'm obsessed with this album. I'm obsessed with both of her albums. And that artist is Judy Sill. This is just an absolute treasure. Judy Sill came out in 1971. She was the first artist signed to Asylum by David Geffen. And even though she was highly touted at the time, she couldn't seem to get off the ground on a commercial level. And but now she's over the years slowly been rediscovered by groups like Fleet Foxes, and Sean Colvin's a big fan. And recently there's been a documentary that's already been made about her, but I think it's trying to find distribution. And I'm really eagerly waiting for that to come out. She has quite a storied life. You know, she was involved in prostitution for a while. She was a bank robber. And finally, she went to some kind of reform school where she learned to play the piano and ended up becoming this just unbelievable songwriter. And this is her first album. Not only is she just an amazing songwriter and arranger, but her vocal prowess is just incredible. What she does with harmonies, it's kind of like what Brian Wilson does with the Beach Boys. She does all the harmonies. Some of the highlights on this album, which in my opinion, the whole album is a highlight. A song called The Lamb Ran Away with the Crown. And what she does on the verse vocal is beyond belief. All these different twists and turns of melody going on in that, just the verse alone. Jesus Was a Crossmaker, a song produced by Graham Nash, which was her single at the time, is an amazing tune. Another one too, a very surreal kind of, very moody song called Lopin' Along Through the Cosmos on side 2 is great. But the whole album, I highly recommend this album. It's just an absolute, it's like finding a treasure. It's just from start to finish, the songwriting, everything about it is amazing. And then she released one more album in 73 called Heart Food, which is not as good, but I'd give it at least a 4-star. There's a song on here called The Kiss, which has gained a lot of traction on YouTube. A lot of people love that song. Andy Partridge has exclaimed praise about that song. But there's a song on side 2, last song, called The Donor. It starts off with these just layers of vocals, a cappella vocals. And you have to hear it on headphones to believe it. It's just amazing. It goes on for about 8 minutes with all of these twists and turns. And yeah, it's one thing you have to listen to it. I wish I could play it for you here on this channel, but I cannot. Check it out on any streaming service. You'll be blown away. So Judy Sill to me is another just true underappreciated talent, vocalist that you need to check out. Moving on to the 80s, another vocalist I always really loved but never really got a lot of attention for her vocals is Suzanne Vega. I love her breathy, smoky vocals. It's just, she doesn't sound like anybody. She doesn't try to sound like anybody. She's kind of stands apart. It's not like she's some kind of like amazing vocalist like, say, Ella Fitzgerald or anything like that, but it's just she has her own style, and I've always loved her songs. Solitude Standing, her second album, has a plethora of amazing songs. The title track, Solitude Standing, the hit Luca, and then she went on and did some more kind of electronic experiment type stuff on 99.5 Fahrenheit degrees. That song's amazing. So love Suzanne Vega. I don't think she gets enough props for her vocals. And then another great one, which a lot of people don't know, is Julie Driscoll. She's a British singer, came out in the late 60s, had a hit single with Brian Auger, keyboardist Brian Auger, of Dylan's This Wheel's on Fire. But there's an album that came out in 1969 called Street Noise. Julie Driscoll, Brian Auger, and then Trinity. This album right here is one of the most underrated albums of the 60s. And Julie Driscoll is like a combination of like, Nina Simone, Etta James, a little bit of Aretha. And her vocals are off the charts amazing. Talk about underrated. Never really truly got her due here in the States. But I highly recommend this album if you can find it. It's an absolute 5-star album. It's a double album. Some of the highlights on this album, she kind of shifts from song to song. She does blues, she does folk, she does gospel. just depending on the song. You've got this song called Czechoslovakia on side 1, which has these multi-part tracks, it's like a multi-part suite kind of thing. She does a version of Nina Simone's Take Me to the Water, which is just unbelievable gospel. Another song called A Word About Color, which is kind of a folk song. She does her own version of Light My Fire, which I think is the best version I've ever heard of Light My Fire, next to the Doors version. Another song called Indian Rope Man, which you can pull up on YouTube. There's a great video of that song, black and white, from '69. By the way, this album came out in '69. She also does a version of Miles Davis, All Blues, just amazing. And also covers a Laura Nyro song called Save the Country. Mixed in with some originals, there's a song side of just all Brian Auger instrumentals. But this whole album, in my opinion, is one of the greatest albums ever. So check out Julie Driscoll. She later changed her name to Julie Tippett and released some solo albums under that name as well. But highly recommend Julie Driscoll. She's a really amazing talent, and she's still around today, and I think she's still putting out music. So that's another one. And then focusing here back to the 80s, another vocalist I've always loved that really never got a lot of props is Tracy Thorne from Everything But the Girl. And Everything But the Girl started, they were kind of like a pseudo jazz band, kind of like in the style of Style Council. But they also had this kind of jingle jangle type of thing going on too. It's like this weird mixture. But I've always loved these first 2 Everything But the Girl albums. This is the self-titled one. It's also called Eden on the import, the British version. And then the second album I really love, called Love Not Money, has some really amazing songs. When All's Well is a great song. They had a single on here called Are You Trying to Be Funny? She also does an amazing version of Kid by the Pretenders. She almost sounds like an offshoot of Chrissie Hynde at times, but she has her own kind of style. I remember seeing Everything But the Girl back at the Wiltern back in 1990. They were supporting the album The Language of Life, and it was just an amazing show. Her husband, Ben Watt, is part songwriter of Everything But the Girl. They're still together today. And then they also had a huge hit in the late 90s called Missing, which was neither this kind of style of these 2 albums. It was more kind of dance, more of a dance kind of song. And then I thought I'd throw in Etta James as well in this list, because everybody talks about Aretha, and we know Aretha is fantastic, but no one really gives a lot of props to Etta James, and I think she's just one of the all-time greats. This is her album, Tell Mama. There's so many great songs on here. The Love of My Man, I'd Rather Go Blind, My Mother-in-Law, just an absolute 5-star album here from 1968. Just a real spitfire of a singer. She can do blues. She's soulful. She almost has this punk rock attack, which is featured here on Etta James Rocks the House. This was recorded in, I believe it was Tennessee in 1963. And she just has the audience in the palm of her hand, and just a lot of call and response with the audience. Fantastic stuff here, Etta James. So there's a 10 right there, 10 fantastic, kind of underappreciated, underrated singers, in my opinion, that a lot of people don't talk about on a normal basis. I thought I'd give props. Feel free to throw your choices in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching. Please press the subscribe button. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.